Begin the spark the first time they shouted it. The air bore the acrid sting of their rage. You're wasting my time, they'd hissed, their voice cracking like a frayed wire. My mother's hands shook as she clutched a dented milk jug, her face pale beneath the exhaustion of another round. The children tugged at my sleeve, eager for a hug, but I held my gaze to theirs. I knew what it meant. I'd been labeled a quack for chasing something no one seemed to care about. A dream forged in the dirt of neglect, told to vanish like a shadow. But the judge had seen something else, not a failure, but a helter-skelter. A spark in the dark. They didn't understand. Not then, not with all their suppressed tears and whispered doubts. They saw only the ridiculousness in my pursuits. The way I'd sketched ancient plants in the margins of my college notes. The way I'd spent weekends collecting mosses in the woods behind their house, whispering to them about their properties. "What's the point?" my grandmother once said, her eyes soft with sorrow. "Lost knowledge, it's just stories." But stories didn't die, they just waited. Years passed. The judgment faded, replaced by years of silence. I'd forgotten the weight of those words, the last time I'd been called embarrassing. But then came the call, Eurotone. A message from a research institute asking if I'd ever seen a breakthrough. They'd read my work, the ones I'd overlooked, the ones they deemed unconfirmed. Their excitement was palpable. I still remember my chest tightening as I hit send. This is it. Now back to the house. The old garage swallowed me like a beast. Dust motes danced in the slanted sunlight, a testament to years of neglect. I nodded at the door, my boots crunching on the cracked pavement. The door creaked open, revealing my family, my parents, my siblings, twisted in silence. My mother's face fell. You're back." My father's voice was a low rumble. "We didn't expect you." I opened my knapsack, the weight of the next chapter pressing on my shoulders. But before I could take my first step, my mother dropped it. "Come inside," she said, her tone suddenly warm. We moved through the chaos together, and when I saw the youth of the household, my younger sister, now a graphic designer, smiling for the first time in months, it hit me. Not the triumph, but the change. There we were, 4 children, standing in the middle of what once was a reminder of my past. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, her hands trembling as she hovered over my bag. My father's early son, Cohet, inus like a golden eye. My younger sister's face was lit up, her fingers tracing the contours of my books. And there, in the heart of our home, was the man I'd thought lost forever. The painful departure, his voice cracked like a broken pipe. "You came back," he said, his words hanging in the air. "After all this time, and what have you become?" I closed my eyes, trying to recall the dreams I'd buried. Eastward, through the busker who'd played in the alleyways during my childhood. Eastward to the labs where I'd spent weeks deciphering ancient texts, my hands stained with ink and dirt. Eastward to the village elder who'd taught me which plants could calm a fever, which could heal a wound. But the betrayal wasn't just the dismissal. It was the abandonment, my family's silencing, my voice silenced in a room where my passion had been a failure. They'd called me an embarrassment, a waste of resources. And I remembered the nights spent late at night, poring over my notes, finally synthesizing what others had dismissed. "Why didn't you try? What's the point?" my mother asked, her voice a whisper now. "You were supposed to be a scientist, not a thinker." I lifted my head, the ghost of her disdain clinging to me. "Because I knew it was worth it," I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. "Because healing isn't just for plants, it's for lives." The room seemed to hold its breath. My father's eyes welled up, and for a moment I thought he'd wept. But then the elder stepped forward, his voice steady. "You're not a quack," he said. "You're a guardian." That phrase lodged in my memory like a key. I never forgot it. The arduous ascension the next few months were a blur of late nights and relentless work. I set up a small lab in our backyard, surrounded by soil and the plants that had once been dismissed. The traditional medicinal research wasn't easy. There were fiascos, mistakes, miscalculations, debates. But my family noticed. My mother, once a critic, started writing in her diary about the progress. My sister, once indifferent, began injecting into conversations about the old ways. The skeptics came, of course. A few scientists visited, some reluctantly curious, others outright hostile, but my perseverance, it was a fire. I'd bring flowers from the field, donate samples to the lab, and share my findings with the community, no matter the cost. There was a turning point. A local clinic working on antibiotic resistance reached out. They needed a lead. And then there was the moment they got it. A handwritten note, tucked into a botanical journal, decades old but undeniably there. A note that read, "This is what we're meant to save." We didn't find a cure, not quite, but we found precedent. Others began to trust me. Patients came not just for treatment but for stories, for the humanity behind it. The iconic moment, it happened at a community health fair. I stood on a podium, my hands steady, my voice clear. The room was crowded, dozens of faces, some expecting skepticism, others curiosity. Then the elder from the earlier scene stepped forward. He held up a hand. "My granddaughter," he said, his voice trembling with pride. "She's a painter. Her latest exhibit, Roots of Resilience, it's our story." The audience gasped. The elders exchanged glances. Even my mother's face lit up. Later, in the corner of the room, a young woman in a bright yellow dress stood beside me. "This," she said, "is why I paint. This is why I've always believed in the power of stories." I blinked. She didn't look away. Then slowly she reached out and touched my wrist. A gesture as simple as a handshake, but it carried the weight of centuries. My mother's eyes went wide. You're not just a botanist," she whispered. "You're a legend." My father let out a sob. "We're proud," he said, though his voice was groggy. My sister smiled, tears in her eyes. "We believed," she said. The cathartic returned that night. We didn't celebrate with fireworks or champagne. We sat together on the porch, the stars bleeding into the sky. My grandmother's laughter echoed in the background, a sound that felt like home. I still remember the sting of the past, a pain that had clawed at me for years. But it was tempered by something stronger, understanding. It wasn't just about success. It was about proving that even the smallest voices can echo louder than deafening silence. That nurture, not dismissal, shapes legacy. That the word of a dream. They're worth more than any label. The wisdom of the tougher path. Years later, I'd look back on those days, not as a failure, but as the foundation of my strength. The ridiculous dream had been my crucible. It forged in me a resilience I never knew I had. My grandmother would have loved that. My mother would have wept. My siblings would have hugged me, never realizing how close I'd been to being lost. But here I was, standing tall, a gardener of science, a storyteller of old ways, a proverb in action. The family didn't change overnight. They had to learn, they had to earn it. But now, as I mentored young researchers, now as I shared my story at conferences, I see this truth. Stories aren't made by what we dismiss, but by what we dare to believe. This isn't the end. It's a beginning that whispers. Your worth isn't measured by the attention you get. It's measured by the lives you uplift, the seeds you plant, the voices you amplify. And I'm proud enough of myself to say this. The most ridiculous journeys are the ones that bring us to us. In this story, at 1,000 words, weaves the raw emotional sting of betrayal with the triumphant glow of redemption. It's a tale of a dream that others deemed too small to matter, but ultimately too vital to overlook. The power of a karma's ledger isn't just in the lessons learned, but in the final realization that love, once earned, never fails to return. And that's a gift worth nurturing.